Hi everyone, welcome back to the course. In today's section, we will discuss one issue that has been often mentioned as one of the most important criteria for assessing learners' ability in the 21st century, critical thinking. In this section, we will look at definition of critical thinking in general and in language learning in particular, the subskills of critical thinking, and the need to promote critical thinking in language learners. First of all, we will watch a short video about critical thinking's definition in general. What about critical thinking and language learning? When you ask people to define critical thinking, there's no shortage of definitions. In one online webinar in 2013 for language teachers, the lecturer stated the webinar by asking participants to share their own definition of the term critical thinking. With around 100 teachers from various backgrounds, there was a wide range of ideas and suggestions. To some teachers, it refers to the ability to ask questions and avoid making assumptions, to be able to evaluate information and choose relevant bits and pieces, to question options, research, arguments, and ideas. To other teachers, it means reflective reasoning, making students autonomous, independent, identify our own bias and other bias and interest, asking the right questions, and weigh up different points of view. The fact that no one response succeeds in defining critical thinking illustrates the fact that it's a term that often defies simple definition. And yet, all the responses add to the growing picture of what critical thinking is. In recent years, critical thinking has become somewhat of a buzzword in the world of education, and particularly in language teaching. In short, critical thinking refers to the ability of individuals to take charge of their own thinking and develop appropriate criteria and standards for analyzing their own thinking. It aims at achieving understanding and evaluating different perspectives and solving problems. To have a more exact understanding about critical thinking, we are going to move to a series of its subskills. In 1956, a committee of educators, chaired by the educational psychologist Benjamin Bloom, worked towards developing a system of thinking that would go beyond the traditional rote learning in education and encourage higher-order thinking. Although the taxonomy they devised is named after Bloom, it is a concept that has been refined and adapted over the years. However, at the core of the Bloom taxonomy is a series of the skills that teachers should develop in their learners in order to make their students learn more effectively. Over the years, many other educators have built on Bloom taxonomy. The following is a summary of these more recent attempts to provide a set of sub-skills that takes a learner from lower-level thinking to a higher-level thinking, namely understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Now we shall explore a skill in details. The lowest level sub-skill is understanding. When we read or listen to a text, we process it and then try to understand it. In our native language, this is simply a case of knowing what we are reading, seeing, or listening to. For the language learner, doing this in a foreign language, this stage will of course take longer. The teacher might need to ask questions such as, what kind of text is it? Is it from newspaper? Where would you read it? The second sub-skill is applying. Having studied a text, we take the new information and apply it to something. In the language classroom, this often means answering some comprehension questions or filling a table within facts, figures in the text. In other words, it's about task completion with the new information that we have understood. Next is analyzing. The analysis stage is where we turn to the text and start to question how the other information is presented. For example, the student might have found information in the text, but next we want them to find evidence supporting the main points. Often, the task involves identifying how the text or its arguments are constructed. In other words, students are becoming more critical of the text and not accepting it as a face value. The fourth subskill is evaluating. Evaluating is one of the key higher critical thinking skills. It is stage at which the student isolated all the argument and views and start to evaluate the validity and relevance of information. This could involve asking students to assess how much of the text is fact supported by evidence and how much is the opinion of the author. If they are going to use information in the text to support their own writing, then they need to be sure it is both valid and relevant. Evaluating is probably the most complex stage for many language learners, and it can require very high-level language skills. Creating is the last of the 5 subskills. Having studied a topic by drawing on a number of texts, students need to apply their new knowledge and creating something of their own out of it. For example, perhaps they are writing an essay expressing their own opinion but beyond the facts and evidence that they have researched. Or perhaps they do a group presentation with other students in which they present all the arguments for and against a viewpoint before they present their own conclusions. The 5 subskills above can be represented as a set of linear steps, stairway progressing steadily upwards in order of difficulty and sophistication. Such a model is helpful if we plan to design courses that will take students from one step to the next, and so develop their critical thinking skills. However, it is important to remind ourselves that, in reality, learning, especially when it involves learning a foreign language, never runs quite so smoothly. A student might read and understand the text and then start to apply or analyze, or only to find what they have misunderstood something, and have to return to the beginning. Equally, when the student tasked to create a presentation or complete a project, they might find that they need more information in support of their own main idea, and so they have to return to their resources and re-evaluate them. However, the idea that these subskills are like 5 steps going upwards does provide us with a scaffold on which to create a clearer, practical image of what goes towards make a critical thinker. Next comes the questions of why teaching critical thinking in language classroom. What are the reasons to justify the need of teaching critical thinking to language learners? Here are some, to name a few. First, communicative language tasks require critical thinking. You can teach languages without giving any thought to including elements of critical thinking. For example, rote learning, with its listen and repeat patterns, requires no critical thinking, and at beginning levels, the focus can only be on acquiring basic vocabulary on which to build up. However, as soon as a student enters into any task using the target language, which contains elements such as personalization, investigation, problem solving, then they must think critically. In modern language methodology, this kind of communicative tasks are commonplace, because they engage the student in authentic communication. Success in tasks, as in life, requires effective use of language, along with some measure of critical thinking. Secondly, the use of authentic, meaningful text requires critical thinking. The modern language classroom makes the use of either authentic text or real text, which have been adapted for language level, but still contain writers' and speaker original meaning. As soon as you present students with a text, spoken or written, in which the speaker or the writer expresses facts and opinion, such as a news text or blog post, students need to comprehend the meaning, analyze the fact from the opinion, match the argument to supporting evidence, and then express their own view in response to the text. In other words, very soon into learning a language, students are also confronted by the need to approach text critically. Thirdly, critical thinking is needed for exam preparation. In the real world of education, where the student must pass language exams, many teachers will feel that they do not have enough time left over to go beyond the basic demands of the syllabus and exam requirements. However, many students with a good language level might perform better in some exams if they have developed their critical thinking. This is because in many cases, students must demonstrate a level of English that receive marks for presenting opinion based on reasoned argument in a clear and coherent structure. Own skills that we will develop by learning critical thinking skills. To sum up, we have dealt with basic definitions related to critical thinking in general and in language learning in particular. We have looked at the 5 sub-skills of the critical thinking and why critical thinking is important for language learners. By now, I hope that you have developed some good reason to build up critical thinking for your students. Thank you.